Chapter 4, Continued. On the day Ansett turned 15, he waited expectantly for the door to open, for the mayor, or better yet, someone from the songhouse, to come in, to take his hand and bring him out. The mayor did indeed come in. Near evening he came, and wordlessly handed a paper to Ansett. It was in Richter's handwriting. "I regret to inform you that the songhouse has sent us word that you are not to return to them. Your service of 2 emperors, they said, has polluted you, and you may not go back." The message was signed by Este. "It is unfortunate that this message should have come when you are no longer welcome here. We are currently holding meetings to decide what we can possibly do with you, since neither we nor the Songhouse can find any further justification for maintaining you. This undoubtedly comes as a blow to you. I'm sure you can guess how sorry I am. Richter's McCall, Imperator." If Ansett's long silence in McCall's rooms had ended with a return to the Songhouse, it might have helped him grow, as the silence and suffering in the high room with Este had helped him grow. But as he read the letter, the songs drained out of him. Not that he believed the letter at first. At first he thought it was a terrible, terrible joke, a last vindictive act by Richter's to make Ansett regret wanting to leave Earth and return to the Songhouse. But as the hours passed, he began to wonder. He had heard nothing from the Songhouse in his years on Earth. That was normal, he knew, but it was also distancing him from his memories there. The stone walls had faded into the background, and the gardens of Susquehanna were more real to him. Richter's was more real to him than Este, though his feelings for Este were more tender. But with that distance he began to think, perhaps Este had merely been manipulating him. Perhaps their ordeal in the high room had been a stratagem, and nothing more. Her complete victory over him and not a shared experience at all. Perhaps he had been sent to Earth as a sacrifice. Perhaps the skeptics were right, and the Songhouse had given in to McCall's pressure and sent him a songbird knowing he was unworthy, knowing that it would destroy the songbird they sent and they could never bring him home. Maybe that was why, when McCall died, the Songhouse did the unthinkable and let him stay with Richter's Ashen. It fit, and the more Ansett thought about it, the better it fit, until by the time he was able to sleep he had almost despaired. He still harbored a hope that tomorrow the Songhouse people would come in and tell him it was a cruel joke by Richter's, and they had come to claim him. But the hope was slimmer, and he realized that now, instead of being one of the few people on Earth who could regard himself as independent of the Emperor, almost his equal, he was utterly dependent on Richter's, and not at all sure that Richter's would feel any obligation to be kind. That night his control failed him, and he awoke from a dream weeping out loud. He tried to contain himself, but could not. He had no way of knowing that it was the onset of puberty that was weakening, temporarily, his knowledge of himself. He thought that it was proof that the Songhouse was right. He was polluted, weakened, unworthy to return and live among the singers. If he had been restless before, now he was frantic. The rooms were smaller than they had ever been before, and the softness of the floor was unbearable. He wanted to strike it and find it hard. Instead, it yielded to him. The dust, which his constant walking had pushed to the edges and corners of the room, began to irritate him, and he sneezed frequently. He constantly caught himself on the edge of tears, told himself it was the dust, but knew it was the terror of abandonment. Almost all his life he could remember he had been surrounded by security. At first the security of the Songhouse, and later the security of an emperor's love. Now suddenly both of them were gone, and a long-forgotten abandonment began to intrude into his dreams again. Someone was stealing him away. Someone was taking him from his family. Someone was vanishing his family in the distance, and he would never see them again, and he woke up in the darkness, full of terror, afraid to move in his bed, because if he so much as lifted an arm, they would cease to forbear. They would take him, and he would never be found again, would live perpetually in a small cell in a rocking boat, would always be surrounded by the leering faces of men who saw only his nakedness and never his soul. And then, after a week of this, his long silence ended. The mayor came for him. "Richter's wants to see you," the mayor said, and because he was not delivering a memorized message, his voice was his own, and it was sympathetic and warm. And Ansett trembled as he walked to him, and took his offered hand, and let himself be led from McCall's rooms to Richter's magnificent apartments. The Emperor waited for him, standing at a window, looking out over the forest where the leaves were starting to go red and yellow. There was a wind blowing outside, but of course it did not touch them. The mayor brought Ansett inside, and left him alone with Richter's, who showed no sign of knowing the boy had come. Boy? Ansett was, for the first time, aware that he was growing, that he had grown. Richter's did not tower over him, as he had when he took him away from the Songhouse. Ansett still did not come to his shoulder, but he knew that some day he would. and felt a growing equality with Richter's. Not an equality of independence, for that feeling was gone, but an equality of manhood. My hands are large, Ansett thought. My hands could tear his heart out. He pushed the thought into the back of his mind. He did not understand his lust for violent action. He had had his fill of it, he thought, when he was a child. Richter's turned to face him, and Ansett saw that his eyes were red from weeping. "I'm sorry," Richter said, and he wept again. The grief was sincere, unbearably sincere. By habit, Ansett went to the man, but habit had weakened. Where before he would have embraced Richter's and sung to him, he only came near, did not touch him, and certainly did not sing. He had no song for Richter's now. "If I could undo it, I would," Richter said. "But you pushed me harder than I can endure it. No one but you could have made me so angry, could have hurt me so deeply." Truth rang in Richter's voice, and with a sinking of his heart, Ansett realized that Richter's had not defrauded him. He was telling no lies. "Won't you sing to me?" Richter's pleaded. Ansett wanted to say yes, but he could not. He hunted inside himself, but he couldn't find one. Instead of songs, tears pressed forward in his mind. His face twisted, and he shook his head, making no sound. Richter's looked at him bitterly, then turned away. "I thought not. I knew you could never forgive me." Ansett shook his head and tried to make a sound, tried to say, "I forgive you," but he found no sound inside himself right now, found nothing but fear and the agony of being forsaken. Richter's waited for Ansett to speak, to deny, to forgive. When it became clear the silence would last forever if it were up to Ansett to break it, Richter's walked, around the room, touching windows and walls. Finally he came to rest on his bed, which, when it was clear he was not going to lie down, cooperated by flowing up and around his back a little, providing support. "Well then, I won't punish you further by keeping you with me here in the palace. You aren't going back to 2. I can't just pension you off, I owe you better treatment than that. So I've decided to give you work." Ansett was incurious. "Don't you care?" "Well, I do," Richter said to Ansett's silence. "The manager of Earth is due for a promotion. I'll give you his job. You report directly to the Imperial capital. No prefects between us. The mayor wanted to give you something smaller, some office where you wouldn't have so much responsibility." Richter's laughed. "But you aren't trained for any lesser office, are you? At least you know protocol, and the staff is very good. They'll carry you until you learn your way. If you need help, I'll see to it you get it." Richter studied Ansett's face for any sign of emotion, though he knew better. Ansett wanted to show him something, show him what he was looking for. But it took all Ansett's concentration to maintain control, to keep from breaking the glass and leaping from the palace to get outside, to keep from weeping until he cried his throat out. So Ansett said and showed nothing. "But I don't want to see you," Richter said. Ansett knew it was a lie. "No, that's a lie. I must see you. I can't live without seeing you. I found that out clearly enough, Ansett. You showed me how much I need you. But I don't want to need you. Not you. Not now. And so I can't want to see you. And so I won't see you. Not until you're ready to forgive me. Not until you can come back and sing to me again." "I can't sing to anyone," Ansett wanted to say. "So I'll have them give you some sort of training. There isn't any school for planet managers, you know. The best they can do, meetings with the current manager. And then they'll take you to Babylon. It's a beautiful place, they tell me. I've never seen it. Once you get to Babylon, we'll never meet again." His voice was painful, and it tore at Ansett's heart. For a moment he wanted to embrace this man who had, after all, been his brother and his friend. He had known Richter's, he thought, and Ansett did not know how not to love someone he so completely understood. But I did not really understand him, Ansett realized. Richter's was hidden from me, and I do not know him. It was a wall, and Ansett did not breach it. Instead, Richter's tried to. He got up from the bed, and came to where Ansett stood, knelt in front of him, embraced him around the waist, and wept into his hip, clinging desperately. "Ansett, please take it back. Say you love me. Say this is your home. Sing to me, Ansett." But Ansett held his silence, and the man slid down his body until he lay crumpled at Ansett's feet. And finally the weeping stopped, and without lifting his head, Richter said,
Go. Get out of here. You'll never see me again. Rule the earth, but you won't rule me any longer. You can leave.
Ansett pulled away from Richter's slack arm and walked to the door. He touched it. It opened for him. But he had not left when Richter's cried out in agony,
"Why won't you say anything to me?"
Ansett turned around, hunting for something to break the silence with. Finally, he thought of it. "Thank you," he said. He meant, thank you for caring for me, for still wanting me, for giving me something to do now that I can't sing anymore, now that my home is closed to me. But Richter's heard it another way. He heard Ansett saying, "Thank you for letting me leave you. Thank you for not requiring me to be near you. Thank you for letting me live and work in Babylon where I won't be required to sing for you anymore." And so, to Ansett's surprise, when his voice croaked out the two words, utterly devoid of music, Richter's did not take them kindly. He only looked at Ansett with a look that the boy could only interpret as cold hatred. The look held for a few minutes, an unbearably long time, before Ansett finally could not stand to see Richter's hatred any longer. He turned away and passed through the door. It closed behind him. When the door closed, Ansett realized that at last he was no longer a songbird. The work he had now would require no songs. To his surprise, he felt relieved. The music fell off him like a burden, welcomely shed. It would be some time before he realized that not singing was an even heavier burden, and one far harder to be rid of.
Songhouse can find any further justification for maintaining you. This undoubtedly comes as a blow to you. I'm sure you can guess how sorry I am. Richter's McCall, Imperator.
If Ansett's long silence in McCall's rooms had ended with a return to the Songhouse, it might have helped him grow. As the silence and suffering in the high room 15, he waited expectantly for the door to open, for the mayor, or better yet, someone from the Songhouse, to come in, to take his hand and bring him out. The mayor did indeed come in. Near evening he came, and wordlessly handed a paper to Ansett. It was in Richter's handwriting.
I regret to inform you that the Songhouse has sent us
Chapter 4, continued. On the day Ansett turned with Este had helped him grow. But as he read the letter, the songs drained out of him. Not that he believed the letter at first. At first he thought it was a terrible, terrible joke, a last vindictive act by Richter's to make Ansett regret wanting to leave Earth and return to the Songhouse. But as the hours passed, he began to wonder. He had heard word that you are not to return to them. Your service of 2 emperors, they said, has polluted you, and you may not go back. The message was signed by Este. It is unfortunate that this message should have come when you are no longer welcome here. We are currently holding meetings to decide what we can possibly do with you, since neither we nor the